Now that you know that there are only 3 ways that you can do property deals, I'm sure you're ready to find out what they are. So let's go. Good day, good day, good day. Samuel ICanWin here, and in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you the only 3 ways that you can do property deals. Now, the first thing I want to share is that it took me a long time to discover these 3 ways, but I literally learned these 3 ways through means of my own experience, as well as watching a number of people who came through as coaching clients ask me to help them with their property portfolios and their property businesses. Now look, I'm just gonna level with you straight off the front of this video. If you're someone who's new to this channel, I'm gonna tell you what those 3 ways are literally in less than the next 2 minutes. And if you're someone who's been here before, then you know all the value comes throughout the interesting part of the video, which is after I spill the beans and literally explain how those beans work. So without further ado, let me tell you what those 3 ways are before I jump onto the board and break each and every one of them down so you understand exactly how they will help you move further, faster in your property investing journey. And as I usually say, if you're someone who's brand new to the channel, feel free, if you get any value throughout this video, to hit that like button, and side by side with that, why not consider subscribing so you can get more content and value like this on a regular basis. Now, with that being said, let's jump straight in. You might be asking yourself, Samuel, what are these 3 specific ways that I can do property deals? And if they're the only ways I can do property deals, I'm interested in finding out what they are. Well, I'm going to tell you what they are because they're the exact same 3 ways that we hear about from the old Western movies. And that is simply the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to detail each and every one of those ways in order to help you understand why some of those ways are going to be extremely detrimental to you and how many property investors find themselves literally making those mistakes and walking down those paths instead of the one singular way which makes the most financial sense. So without further ado, let's jump onto the board and go into the first of those 3 ways. Let's go. Okay, so let's start by literally jumping into the first out of these 3 ways that you can do property deals. Now, I want you guys to understand that the first way I'm going to explain, the reason I'm sharing this way first is because this is the way that most people do property, okay? And it might surprise you, but I'm just going to be completely transparent. Now, the first way is the bad way. Now, the interesting thing is many people are going to be saying to themselves, oh, Samuel, how can the main way most people do property be the bad way? And I'm going to explain. You see, I come across many people who are doing property and have believed the myth that they say, you can't go wrong with property. Now, the reality is you can go wrong with property because the only thing that's ever guaranteed whenever you buy a property is that your expenses go up. The moment you buy a new property, you end up with a brand new liability that you have to pay for every single month, whether that's an investment property or not. There is no guarantee whenever you buy a property that your income will go up, okay? You've got to do additional work to make that happen, whether that be tenanting the property and so on and so forth. Now, the reason why most people are doing property the bad way is because statistically what you will find when you do the research is the large majority of people, over 60% of people who say they're property investors only own 1 or 2 properties, only own 1 or 2 investment properties. And how's that so? Well, let me tell you how it's so. It's so because many times you meet somebody, let's say Jillian, who goes and meets Jonathan, and apologies if your name's Jillian or Jonathan, okay, it's nothing personal, this is just fictitious names for the example. And when Jillian meets Jonathan, Jillian already owns a 2-bedroom flat, and Jonathan already owns a 1-bedroom flat. And Jillian and Jonathan decide to start dating, end up in a relationship, and get married. And straight after they get married, Jillian and Jonathan decide to move into one of their properties. And what happens? They end up with what they call a spare property. Now, unfortunately, in many cases, the Jillians and the Jonathans of the world wrongly assume that they are property investors. They're not property investors. In actual terminology, they are accidental landlords because they've now got a property, a spare property, which they're now going to use to rent out and generate income. But that property was never initially bought with the purpose to generate them income from rental. And because of that, that makes them accidental landlords, not professional investors, okay? And not even professional landlords. Now, they can become professional landlords they can become professional investors, but they're not at the point of where I've shared this story up to. Now, this is important because the overwhelming majority of people throughout the UK, throughout the world, become landlords in this kind of fashion, this kind of accidental fashion. And because that's the case for the large majority of people, this is the exact reason why most people are doing property the bad way. So you might be saying to yourself, well, Samuel, what is the bad way? And I'm gonna share with you exactly 2 characteristics to help you understand if you are doing property the bad way, or if you know someone who may be doing property the bad way. Now, the first characteristic of doing property the bad way is when you have a deal, when the deals don't stack up, okay? So you have a property deal, but that specific property deal doesn't stack up. And when I say it doesn't stack up, what I mean is when you do the numbers, when you calculate the return on investment, it doesn't make good financial sense. So I'll give you an example. If you have a property that you have bought, you've invested money in, and you calculate the return on investment and find that you are generating a 2% return on investment per annum, well, you could also generate that 2% by throwing your money into the stocks and shares market. Now, the interesting thing about the stocks and shares market is historically, over a 10-year average, functions like the FTSE 100, stocks like the FTSE 100 have performed at a 6% per annum on average rate. Now, what does that mean? That simply means that if you had that same money invested in the FTSE 100 stock, and for those of you who don't know what that is, that's literally a collection of the 100 most profitable businesses or most lucrative businesses in the UK, you would have generated 6% on average over the last 10 years. So why is that important? Well, it's important because it means if you're getting a 2% return on a property deal, when that same money could have created a 6% return for you in stocks and shares, you're literally placing your money in the wrong place in that example. So for me, that's doing property the bad way. That's a bad way. Let me share with you the second thing that's a bad way of doing property. The second way is when you're doing deals which don't have margin. Okay? Now, don't have margin, what does that mean? Well, that means there's no wiggle room inside of the deal. And effectively, the way that works is we have so many people in the UK who buy a property, rent the property out, and after 4 years, 5 years, 8 years, they've had maybe one tenant who stayed there for 3-4 years, moved out, the house is in a bit of disarray, the landlord hasn't saved any money to repair the house, then they find a way to rent it out again. The second set of tenants come in, stay 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, and then when the second set of tenants come out, that's an 8-year rough track record of that house being rented out 2 times to 2 sets of families, and both times the landlord hasn't had the money to refurbish the property after. And by virtue of that, what happens is the standard of that property deteriorates over time. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, Samuel, what's so bad about that? Well, what's so bad about that is as a property deteriorates in condition, in look, in modernization, it begins to attract the wrong kind of tenant who A, is not gonna pay the highest level of rent, or B, is not gonna take care of the property because the property didn't look taken care of in the first place. And if you guys understand, feel free to let me know in the comments if you know anyone who's gone through that kind of a cycle. Now, let me show you what happens on the other side of that cycle. The cycle begins with a landlord renting their house out. The first set of tenants live in the house, maybe take care of the house, but obviously wear and tear takes place over the 3 to 4 years. Then that first set of tenants move out. Then the landlord doesn't refurbish the property, but rents it out to the second set of tenants. And then the second set of tenants, exactly the same. Maybe they take care of it, maybe they vandalize it. Let's assume in this case, they vandalize it. And then they move out of the property. So after this second set of tenants, if the landlord doesn't have money to refurbish, the standard of the house has radically declined. And not only has the standard of the house radically declined, but side by side with that, if the landlord doesn't have any margin generated from the rental income that they're producing on a month-to-month basis, that doesn't help them to recuperate funds or to store up funds in order to refurbish that property. And obviously, you know what's gonna happen next. They're then gonna attempt to rent the house out again at a poorer standard, and that's not really gonna work. And generally what tends to happen is a few things. One of those things is the landlord ends up with that house literally empty for a number of months, not knowing what to do. Another thing that happens from time to time is the landlord tries to do a fire sale. Fire sale is when you literally try and sell a property as quick as possible just because they have what they call or think of as a problem property because they don't know what to do with it. Or the third thing that could happen is they literally end up sitting on the property and having to take money from other assets or other areas of their life in order to refurbish the property to get them back on track. Now, if the person is someone who's been doing bad deals, okay, a Gillian or Jonathan, if they've been doing bad deals and that's all they know, to them, this isn't even a cycle. They haven't even recognized this as a cycle. So what do you think happens when most people don't recognize they're in a cycle? They continue to repeat the cycle. So I want to encourage you, don't be doing property the bad way. Don't get into the bad way to do property. Now, I'm going to share with you secondarily the ugly way that many people do property, because this for me is probably the most horrendous out of the three, but it's one of the most important because it's a big trap that many people get into. So the ugly way. Now, the ugly way that many people do property is very interesting to me because it has a different two characteristics which are very, very important. Now, the first characteristic is they literally get deals that look like they stack up, but they don't. Okay? Now, you might be saying to yourself, Samuel, I get it. There may be deals that look like they stack up, but they don't. But how do people literally end up with those deals? I'm going to tell you exactly how. One of the key ways that people end up with what I call ugly deals is simply because they get those deals out of what I call deal desperation. Now, deal desperation for me is defined when somebody has spent maybe weeks, days, months, years in some cases, going on training courses, having an interest in property, having a keen desire to do property. And as a result, they might be reading books, they might be going to seminars, going to webinars, going to all of these different kinds of teachers who are telling them it's possible and it's possible like this. But when that person has tried and tried and tried again and hasn't seen themselves actually materializing an opportunity, materializing a deal, what they do is they jump straight into a deal that doesn't actually stack up. Now, how do you jump into a deal that doesn't actually stack up? Let me explain. You end up doing something, which is the second characteristic, which always is embedded with most of these ugly deals. You end up dating a particular person. Now, I'm just gonna share with you her name. Her name is Miss Information. Okay, because typically, this is how people end up with ugly deals. People typically end up with ugly deals, and this is why it's one of the key characteristics of ugly deals, because they've received misinformation. Now, you might know someone who met a property sourcer at a property networking event, and that property sourcer told them that, look, I can find deals which generate a 32% return on investment. And the person has literally run after that property sourcer to acquire that property, paid them the fees to acquire that property, bought that property, and very quickly found out, hold on a minute, this was a deal that looked like it stacked up, but it didn't. Now, the reason why ugly deals for me are some of the most horrendous deals, and when I meet people who have gone through ugly deals or have an ugly deal, have a lemon in their portfolio, it is literally a heartache. The reason why is because you have to understand the component of how misinformation takes over with these ugly deals. You have to understand that the individuals 9 times out of 10 who have jumped into ugly deals are people who have literally maybe been lied to, maybe been deceived, but at the very bare minimum been misinformed. And I want you to make sure that you're not one of those people who does property the ugly way, who does property by getting ugly deals, because you have to understand that these ugly deals are the type of deals you have to stay away from. Now, what's one of the best ways to stay away from ugly deals? I'm going to explain it to you. It's by doing your due diligence. It's by doing the numbers, okay? And there's so many other areas and aspects that you can make sure you get your finger on in order for you to be able to never end up with ugly deals and make sure you do not end up with bad deals, but you literally do property the third way, the way that I think is essential, and you get these kind of deals. And as I mentioned earlier, the other way is good deals. Now, let me start by sharing with you some key characteristics of good deals. The first characteristic is that good deals stack up, and so it's not a separate characteristic, it's part of this characteristic. They stack up and have margin. This is a key characteristic of a good deal. A good deal is not just a deal that's going to make you 200, 300 pounds a month, but it's going to stack up and have margin. What that means is it doesn't just make you enough that if something went wrong in the house, you'd be able to repair it. It makes you enough month by month that if something went wrong, you will not only be able to repair it, cover that damage, cover that empty room, cover that empty house for a month or two, but you'd actually also have margin. So you'll still be generating a revenue on a month by month basis, okay? So that's the first thing. A good deal stacks up and has margin. Now, because a good deal stacks up and has margin, it has a few other elements which are very, very beneficial for us. So I'm gonna share with you what they are. One of them is a good deal generally will have positive cash flow. Now, this should be an easy one for many of us to understand. We should be thinking, well, yeah, Samuel, that makes sense. I should be making money every single month from a good deal. And yes, you should. Now, the reason I want to explicitly share this is because there's many people out there who will buy a property that is making them £200 a month and then go and buy another property which might be losing them £100 a month and then tell themselves it's okay because the first one generates £200 a month. So because the first one generates 200, I'm okay to not make any or lose 100 on the next property because it's kind of a net gain, if you guys understand. Now, the reality is that's not a good deal. A good deal and a good way to do property is to understand that every individual asset, every individual project, every individual property has to be a cash flowing positive property in and of itself exclusively. So that's the first thing. The next thing, besides having a positive cash flow, is that property should also have a positive return. Now, I know some of yous are going to be saying to yourself, but Samuel, hold on a minute. If a property's got a positive cash flow, i.e. I'm making £500 per month every month from that property, then surely it already has a positive return. And the answer to that is not exactly. So let me explain. You see, if you are one of those people who understands the systems, the philosophies of using OPM, which stands for other people's money, then you may be acquiring every one of your good deals using other people's money. And let's say, for example, someone invested, I would say £6,000 into you doing a property investment. And I'm only using £6,000 because it makes the maths easy for you guys to get it on this video very simply. So if someone invests £6,000 for you to go and do a property deal, and you go and do that property deal, and you tell that investor you're going to pay them back £500 every single month for the next 13 months, okay? So let's assume the first 12 months is to pay back the £6,000, and then the 13th month is kind of like your interest, your thank you payment for that person investing the money. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you've acquired a property only generating £500 a month, although that property has a positive cash flow, that property doesn't have for you in the first 13 months a positive return. So hopefully you guys are starting to understand, okay, Samuel, there is a difference between a positive cash flow and a positive return. So the key with good deals is that in order for you to do property the good way, you need to make sure that you are acquiring good deals which not only have a positive cash flow, but they also have a positive return. If you guys understand what I'm talking about, hit that like button and let me know in the comments by saying, I get it, I understand. So the first thing is you want a positive cash flow. The second thing is you want a positive return, and you want to ensure that that return is the kind of return where it stacks up and has margin. Now that you understand the 3 ways that you can do property, you might be someone who's sitting there thinking to yourself, Samuel, I've literally been buying properties for years without ever calculating the return on investment. And I want to assure you that that's okay. I meet hundreds of people who tell me that story. But if you want your future to be completely different and you want to be someone who knows how to acquire good deals, so you are only doing property the right way, then I want to encourage you to hit the subscribe button and press that bell notification so you can stay up to date when we are going to drop each and every video to help you move further faster in your property investment journey. This is Samuel ICanWin. I'm signing out. I'm looking forward to your property investing success. And as I usually say, I want you to remember that it's small keys just like these that open great big doors. I'll see you on the next one. And feel free to go watch one of these videos that YouTube recommends in order to help you go to your next level. Take care. God bless. See you on the next one.